what I think is a very exciting project and an exciting step forward. I've got to say, it's very disconcerting for me to be sitting here with no nodding faces in front of me. Anyone who's seen me talk before will see me walking up and down and engaging with the audience. So this is a bit of a new experience for me. I've done videos before, but I've never actually engaged in this way with so many people. And thank you to so many of you for joining today. So as it says on the first slide, I am Mark Lewis. I'm the National Police Contract Manager, and I'm going to talk to you about a number of things today. So we'll go through the agenda so that you can see what we're going to talk about. First of all, who is Mark Lewis? That sounds very big-headed, and it's not meant to be that way at all. And I'll come as a little bit later as to why we're talking about Mark Lewis. It's a small part of the presentation, and hopefully, bear with me, it will all make sense. We're going to talk in much more detail about my role, and I will give you full details of what my role involves. I'm also going to explain to you why we have a new framework. There's lots out there. Why do we want this one? And I'll explain all that to you. I'm also going to talk about how it will work. And then, this is the most important bit for all of you, I think, the benefit to language professionals. And then after that, as Irina has said, there will be a gap from me speaking. You'll get a rest from hearing my voice droning on. And then the bit that I guess after the information, the bit that's most important to all of you, and that is a chance to give me a good kicking with a load of questions. And I'm looking forward to that. So without further ado, who is Mark Lewis? So let me take you through a few things, and then afterwards I'll explain why I'm telling you all this. So first of all, I was a police officer for 30 years. I spent 30 years in the Metropolitan Police. There will be people out there that have had a great deal of experience of the Metropolitan Police, hopefully in a good way, certainly as working for them. And I spent 30 years there, loved it. It's in my blood, and I'll talk a bit more about that, not specifically about my blood, but about what the police means to me. So if we start, that was the beginning. I joined 30 or 40 years ago, and I retired as Detective Superintendent from the Counter-Terrorist Command at New Scotland Yard. New Scotland Yard, for people who are joining us from another country, I guess is an iconic location, even though it's moved many times. It started off as Great Scotland Yard, became Old Scotland Yard, and then there's been at least 2 different New Scotland Yards, and it is now on the Victoria Embankment. But it is a well-known location. That's the reason I put it up there. If I told you any of the police stations I worked at, people from other countries and cops that I've spoken to all over the world don't know those police stations, but they do know New Scotland Yard. So I want to talk about some of the roles that I've done. And again, I'm going to explain why. This isn't the Mark Lewis show. It's not about me. I was a trained hostage negotiator. So nationally, I was trained in the UK. You may have heard of as an SIO. And then after that, and this is relevant to you all, after that, I became a counter-terrorism senior investigating officer. And then other roles that I've done include public order commanders, so those people that put the riot shields on and helmets and go running out and get petrol bombs and statues thrown at them. I was a firearms officer. Now that's not exceptional for many of you who come from other countries where police are armed routinely. But I was given a gun as a young cop before I was even given a car. I had to walk the beat, but I was given a gun before I was given a car. And then I also did roles in roads policing, which we used to call traffic department, but they're now known as roads policing. And I was a sergeant and inspector in roads policing. So there's some of the roles that I've done within the police. So there's a picture of me with the slug under my nose, for those that have got a big screen that can see it. Sitting on the bonnet, my sergeant would have gone mad if he'd seen me on that bonnet, but sitting on the bonnet of a lovely old police car that you may see in movies, but you won't often see them on the road anymore. And then there's me with a handgun with a Glock 17. We used to have to practice and reclassify every 2 months. So you may have a qualification that you've never had to be retested in to use a firearm every 2 months, as you would expect for the safety of the public. We would retest, and then as well as the handgun, in the next picture you'll see that I also had what's called an MP5, which is just a longer barreled weapon. For those of you who are interested in horses, there's me on a horse. If any of you are riders, you will see that's not a good pose by me. I'm not an expert in riding horses at all, but in the next slide, I will confess I am an expert in riding motorcycles. I spent many years riding motorcycles as a youngster and then within the police, and then I was proudly promoted to be head of the Metropolitan Police Driving School. So I still ride motorcycles to a high standard, I believe, and I keep my skills up and my qualifications. So let's talk about things that I've done since I retired, because that's starting to get a bit boring talking about the police. So I worked in various sectors of the industry. If you ever went to the London Olympics in 2012 and you went to the Olympic Park, you would have come through my domain. I was in charge of the security at the shopping centre at Stratford, and was very proud to have kept 500,000 people a day safe, much more than actually went into the park. So I've done various things for 8 years, and then in June 2018, I joined the Big Word as a police account manager. I wanted to get back into the police. Every job I'd done before that, after leaving the police, was in support of policing. Every job I did allowed me to continue helping the police. In 2018, I was invited to come and work at the Big Word as a police account manager, and soon after that, I was promoted to a client success manager, where I had a team, but I still kept the police. And come back to that, and then this month, or last month now, it's the 1st of July already, isn't it? June 2020, I applied for and was successful in getting the role working under Ian Fraser as the National Police Framework Contract Manager, and here I am now. So I want to pose a rhetorical question. Why am I telling you all this? The reason I told you about the jobs that I've done in the past within the police is because if you do police work, I don't stand in your shoes, but I've probably done every single kind of role that you would possibly be asked to assist the police in. Whether it's a rape or a murder that you're involved in, or whether you're trying to help a victim, I've done absolutely everything in those roles already, with interpreters, with translators, with transcribers, and with non-spoken interpreters as well. So I'm able to assist you to do your job as well as you can. And also, if you're having problems with the police in their understanding, and we're going to talk about that in detail, then I will understand what it's like from your perspective. Okay, so just hold it where you are there, Simona, because I just want to carry on talking about the Big Word. And I want to dispel an issue that's come up a number of times in the last month. I had a great time at the Big Word. If I hadn't worked at the Big Word, I wouldn't be doing the job I'm doing now, probably, because my colleagues there gave me an insight into interpreting from the other side, from the language service provider's side. Now, the bit that I want to explain to you is, you've seen all of the roles that I've done. So for 30 years in the police, I worked for the police. For 8 years, in fact, it's now 10 years outside of the police, I've supported the police. For 2 of those years, I worked at the Big Word. I have no allegiance to the Big Word. I would never have an integrity issue that would allow me to give the Big Word something and treat them any differently to any other language service provider. And I've seen this come up a number of times, and I'm sure it will come up in questions. I am vetted to a high level. I used to be vetted to the very highest level in the UK and in America. My integrity is non-negotiable. I do what's right. And there's a phrase that I've been using, and the Big Word know I've used this phrase. I cost the Big Word money when I worked for them. because I would go the extra mile for the interpreters, translators, transcribers, all those language professionals that I worked with. I would help them. My car was full of bottles of water. When I attended the scene of an incident that was being worked on by any of the interpreters, I would make sure that they went off on their train with a bottle of water, a sandwich, and there may be people who are out here at the moment listening to me that have experienced that. I'm not asking you to back me up, but I also made sure that the police got what they needed, and that cost a big word money. So I'm not going to say any more about that. If it comes up in a specific question, I'll deal with it. But if we move on to my role now, I am employed by Leicestershire Police. I am so proud to be back in the police service again. And my role is to liaise with you all. But I'm going to put that in a little bit more detail. So my role is to liaise with most police forces in the UK. When I say most, I used to work with Jersey Police and the PSNI, Police Service in Northern Ireland. They are not on the framework. So I won't be working with them. And there are some forces within Wales who have their own arrangements. But I am a national resource. I will be liaising with all the language service providers on the framework, and I'll talk more about that later. I've already made contact with a majority of those large companies. Obviously, I know people at the big word. I've spoken with Sintra, I've spoken with Capita. They are all awaiting a personal visit from me so that I can do some auditing, and I'll talk more about that later. No one is concerned from those other companies that I used to work for the big word, and none of you out there should be concerned about that either. So I'm going to be liaising with all the known language professional organisations. The AIT have been the first to come forward and say, hey, come and talk to us. And I'm extremely grateful to the AIT for this. You are, those of you that are listening to this, and welcome to those that are listening to it on recording as well later on, you are the first to get this public presentation about what the police service of the UK are going to be doing. And I'm grateful to the AIT for that. I work closely with NERPC. I'm working closely with every organisation out there. There may be one or two that I haven't got to yet because I didn't know they exist. Get in touch with me, we'll have a conversation. I'm liaising with individual interpreters. Now, it's impossible for me to come out and meet with 2,000, 10,000 interpreters, translators, transcribers. You are all important to me. And I mean that. I'll talk about why you're so important a bit later, but it's important to me that I get to hear from you. And this is a perfect platform for me to hear from you. If you get in touch with AIT, if you get in touch with NERPC, tell them what you want me to know, the problems you're having, good ideas, they will reach me. I have been known to take individual interpreters and language professionals out for lunch to hear what they've got to say, whether it's a complaint or whether it's a good idea or just for a chat if they were unhappy about the way they were treated. I'm quite happy to do that, but my time is limited, as of course is yours. I'll be liaising with the College of Policing. We're going to talk a bit more about that later, and academics regarding advice, guidance and research. I'll talk more about the guidance a bit later. Let me say now, I am really keen to get research going out there. It needs to be independent, and you can get that for me, those of you that are working in those arenas in the universities, and I believe we've got universities trimmed into this today. You can provide me, through your students, with research that shows how you are affected when you deal regularly with upsetting, difficult situations in police work. I know what it's like. And let me tell you something personal. My wife was a detective, excuse me. My wife worked in child protection and it made her ill. And there's lots of cops out there who get made ill. Who asks if the interpreters are okay? I keep hearing that the language service providers are not responsible for the work that's done by those interpreters, translators and transcribers. I want to make sure that everyone gets the help they need. I had someone that worked at the big word who was doing translation. She wasn't a translator. She was working for the Big Word and arranging translation jobs. Something came in from a coroner, and halfway through the work she was looking at, she suddenly saw badly decomposed dead bodies. Really horrible thing. I know the kind of things that you have to deal with. You need help. So the last bullet point on that slide is that we're going to provide training to whoever needs it on police procedures. It's really important to me. I know it will come up in questions. I fully accept the police officers that you deal with on a daily basis may not know what to do. You may know better than them what you're required to do and what you're allowed to do. They only get a set number of hours, days, weeks and months for their training. And we are working with the College of Policing to find a way to ensure that every police officer gets to know the things they need to know. And I will be coming to you all for your help in that to make sure that we don't miss anything out. Okay, so that's about my role. I've got one clear objective. Now, please bear with me. I am going to read this because I want everyone to be clear. I've already talked about lack of loyalty, if that's the right way of putting it, to the Big Word, that I don't have anything other than integrity. I want you all to be clear on this. I have one clear objective in my role as the contract manager of the new police framework, and that's to find middle ground and negotiate to ensure that all parties are able to work with and on the framework for the ultimate safety and security of the UK. The ultimate safety and security of the UK. What does that mean? This is what it means. The police and other law enforcement agencies cannot do their job of keeping us safe without the help and support of experienced and professional interpreters, translators and transcribers, you, the language professionals. And the last bit I want you to understand about me, I am compelled, and I chose that word specifically, I am compelled to ensure that those agencies, which is the police agencies, have a service they need, whenever they need it, and at a price that they can justify to those who foot the bill. A price they can justify to those who foot the bill. It has to be a fair price for you. Has to be a fair price for them as well. Okay, so let's talk about why we've got a new framework. Please write down your questions and bear with me. I want to make this quick so that we've got more time for questions. Okay, other frameworks are designed as a one-size-fits-all. I won't name them, but there are a number of frameworks out there that I have worked on and with, and they work generically for a number of sectors. That's not the case with us. If you want to buy, as a police service, if you want to buy a police car, there is a specific police framework for cars and motorcycles. There's a specific framework for uniforms and helicopters. The police are different to Tesco's. The police are different to Barclays Bank. They have specific needs. So the National Police Framework, I hate this phrase, but I put it in there, so I've got to live with it. It does what it says on the tin. It's specifically designed for law enforcement agencies. Now, there'll be some argument about this point, but I'm going to say it anyway. There has been already comprehensive consultation. My boss, Ian Fraser, started it, and I will continue it. But there has been consultation with all interested parties to see how the framework should work. And my commitment to you all is I will continue to do so to ensure this framework is fit for purpose. Okay, how's it going to work? So following comprehensive user engagement, and I know I'm reading this because again, it does what it says on the tin. Earlier in the year, Leicestershire Police issued an invitation to tender for language service providers. Some of you out there listening to this may have been involved in that. You may well have had to put your tender response in. Going back, I said I wouldn't say any more about it, but in relation to the Big Word, I play no part in who gets on the framework. Ian Fraser is dealing with all. With other procurement experts, they're marking the responses, and I play no part in that. So the service providers that are successful will get on the framework around the 31st of July. I will then audit all service providers. Now, this probably has never been done before in the way that I'm going to do it. All those service providers that have been successful and are on the framework, I will be going to them and saying, this is what you said in your tender process and your tender responses. I now want to check that you're doing what you said you're going to do. And that's my responsibility to do that. And then the framework will go live on around the 1st of September. I think the first Monday in September might be the 4th, but around the 1st of September, the framework will go live. Will it make a difference to you immediately? No, I don't think it will. All the police forces around the country that have their contracts at the moment will most definitely have a contract that will run until next year. So a contract may run until April with one of the providers, and then we'll be looking in January to start working out how that new framework tender process will work for them. Okay. The other bit that was on that last slide was that it's done at a regional level. So there will be mini competition. So the companies could bid nationally to work with all police services nationally, or they could say, no, I only want to work in the southwest, the northwest, the northeast, and they'll be judged against whether they're able to do that. What will then happen is, let me take a force. Let's say the forces in the east, so Kent, Essex, Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire, Norfolk, Suffolk. When their contract comes up for renewal, if they want to use the framework, and we believe they do, they will run a mini competition in that area. And only those who've been on the framework, already been admitted to the framework, will go for that mini competition. And at that point, I'll be ensuring that your concerns, the organisation concerns from the AIT, NERPC, and the language service providers are all taken into account when we actually start working out how you will provide a service in that area to those police forces. So I've seen it come on the slide a number of times. So there's the benefit to language professionals. Please excuse the fact that I'm racing through this. There are so many questions that I know people want to ask, and it's important for me to keep the momentum going so that we've got plenty of time for the questions. So the framework has been developed and designed to work for everyone. I am not going to please every single one of you. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to please every service provider. I'm not going to please every police service with every aspect of this framework, but I want to make it as suitable for all of you as possible. Okay, this is the bit that's really important that hasn't been done before. Police services across the UK will be encouraged to set a minimum hourly rate at regional level for the service providers to pay to language professionals. Not how much the service providers will get, but how much they'll pay you. This is so important. It's not going to be £100 an hour. It's not going to be £50 an hour. But regionally, we need to set a minimum standard per hour that you're going to get paid. Okay, I want that. The framework will encourage the training of language professionals in order to improve your understanding and also the police officers' understanding and ensure that everyone can do the job correctly. You will have so many stories of turning up at a police station and the cop not knowing what you are supposed to do. I need to change that. It's not professional of them. It's not their fault, by the way, and it's not professional for you. So the framework encourages that. The framework will set the minimum qualification and vetting level for the police assignments. It's set by the police themselves. There's already documentation out there and guidance that says we need MPPV3 vetting and DPSI or DPI for an assignment. But let me be clear on this. The rules allow for a lower level of vetting and a lower level of qualification if a police inspector authorises it. Now, I spoke earlier, and I said I'd come back to it. I spoke earlier about my qualifications and that I was a nationally trained SIO, a senior investigating officer. They didn't make me a counter-terrorism investigator straight away. I had to get experience before I could become a counter-terrorism investigator, because they are much higher level of complexity. And it's the same here with interpreters, translators and transcribers. There are occasions when police need to engage with an interpreter or a translator, but they don't need them to be vetted because they're doing something that's public facing, like creating a leaflet or helping with door-to-door inquiries. So I keep seeing that you must be MPPV3. The companies are using people who aren't DPSI or DPI, and that they're not NERC registered. We want the best qualified and vetted interpreters, the best experienced, and I want to increase that as best I can. But the law allows for a lower level on some occasions. If I have enough of the highest qualified, I'll use them every single time. So the last bit is that it's a uniform and consistent approach across the UK. All regions will be working to the same kind of standard, and for the first time, you won't have people on one framework and other forces on another framework. Everyone's going to be working to the same standards and have the same understanding of what's required. Now, if we move on to the next slide, you'll see every subject has had one slide. The benefit to language professionals is the only 2 slides. It's the only time I've got 2 slides there with the same title, because this is what you're here to listen to. Everyone will have a better understanding of police work through training, familiarisation, events and courses. I had the big word working with police services and interpreters. So when we had a new interpreter come on board to work for the police, we invited them to go to a police station before they ever had an assignment there, so that they could familiarise themselves with what their location was like, what the breath test machine was like, what the cells and the interview rooms look like. And I want to do that kind of thing. I want much more of that. A forum for engagement at a national level. And if I did this slide differently, and I thought about it about 10 minutes before we started, it would have been a wheel with the framework at the centre and all these other things on the spokes going out towards the rim. We are now, the framework is a forum for engagement at a national level to make continuous improvement. And I am seeing a willingness by all sides to work together. I'm seeing NERC coming to the table and having meetings with me, basically weekly at the moment, but we'll be having monthly meetings. AIT have invited me here. I haven't mentioned NUBSLE and NRCPD, Chartered Institute of Linguists. I have meetings in the diary with all of them. And when I say meetings, obviously we're doing it with social distancing, but they're in the diary monthly, and we'll continue to do that to hear what you all have to say. The next thing is, hopefully you'll all get better job satisfaction. How would you feel if you turn up at a police station as an interpreter to do an assignment and the cop knows what you need to do? They greet you, they give you a briefing, they put you in a room with a cup of coffee, and then the interviewee is brought in rather than you being left on your own with them. How great would it feel when you go home knowing that you have done the best job you can, you've done a fantastic MG11 interview and statement for them because you know how to do it. They say thank you. It's better. It's better job satisfaction for everyone. An even higher standard of interpreting, translating and transcribing for the benefit of the criminal justice system. I am not talking about going to court now. I'm talking about the police work. The criminal justice system contract for the MOJ is not my arena. I'm only dealing with those of you who go to the police station or to deal with a witness or a suspect or a victim. That's the bit for me. It will get better and better. Here's the important thing as well. Better service for victims and witnesses. Now, I've put in there, especially in the arena of non-verbal communication, I struggled to get BSL interpreters, and by that I'm using BSL as a term for all the different versions of it. I struggled to get people to attend police stations to help. And I was very upset because it's always the victim or the suspect or the witness that doesn't get what they need. So I want to work with those organisations and those individuals to find out what we need to do to make police work more attractive for you. And then the last thing is an enhancement in the reputation of language professionals across the UK. Let me explain what I mean by that, and I've alluded to it already. You go to a police station, you get asked to deal with a victim statement from someone who had a car crash, someone drove into them, and they don't speak English. You're asked to do the statement, and the cop says, right, get on with it. And you say, no, it's not my job to do that. You've got to ask the questions. Two things happen. The cop goes out and makes a complaint, and I used to have to deal with those. A complaint comes in saying your interpreters are useless when you're not, or the interpreter would get in touch with me and say your cops are useless. So I think with what we're trying to achieve, there will be an enhancement of the reputation of all language professionals across the UK, and in the law enforcement sector. You will all benefit. Now, I've been talking for a long time. We're going to take a break so that I can actually get another cup of coffee and drink some water. I really do thank you all for your attention.